Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Happy Halloween, everybody, and welcome back to the Unseen Paranormal. I'm your host, Eric Freeman Sims, and today is our last Halloween special episode. So I've got 3 more stories from my book, Small Town Haunts and Legends of Tennessee, and you can grab your copy of the book at Amazon, Kindle, BarnesandNoble.com, Goodreads, and anywhere else fine books are sold. But let's get on to the 3 stories. Our first story takes place at Carton Plantation in Franklin, Tennessee. In 1796, Randall McGavick immigrated from Virginia to Tennessee, settling in Nashville. He was heavily involved in politics, eventually becoming the mayor of Nashville from 1824 to 1825. Carton was completed in 1826 with the use of enslaved labor, and Randall moved his family to the small town of Franklin. The home was built in the Federal style with 2 stories, a red brick facade, and a limestone foundation. The property was named Carton in honor of the McGavick's heritage in Ireland. The property was successful as a farm where they grew oats, potatoes, wheat, and corn, as well as bred thoroughbred horses. Randall would oversee these operations until his death in 1843. John McGavick inherited the plantation from his father, and the house would become a social and political center, entertaining guests such as Andrew Jackson and James K. Polk. The McGavicks would have a quiet, peaceful existence until the Battle of Franklin broke out on November 30th, 1864. The battle would last around 5 hours and would see over 1,700 men dead, including 14 Confederate officers and thousands more wounded. Carton would serve as the Confederate field hospital, with wounded men tucked in every corner of almost every room in the house. Following the battle, John and Carrie McGavick and their 2 children assisted the surgeons tending to the wounded. It is reported that Carrie McGavick shredded all her dresses and fine linens to use for bandages. Bloodstains are still visible on the hardwood floors of several rooms, the heaviest being upstairs in the children's bedroom. It was used for operations to treat hundreds of bullet wounds and amputations. There are reports that state there were so many amputations that the discarded body parts were stacked from ground to the 2nd-story window. The bodies of Confederate generals Straw, Cleburne, Adams, and Granbury were laid out on the covered back porch until they were taken to their final resting places. Most of the Confederate dead were buried on the battlefield exactly where they died. They were given wooden grave markers inscribed with their name, company, and regiment. The writing began to fade over the months, and the markers started to disappear. John McGavick decided to donate 2 acres of land next to his family cemetery. Money was raised by the citizens of Franklin and the McGavicks, and in 1866, the soldiers' bodies were removed and reburied at Carton. The inscriptions on the battlefield grave markers were carefully recorded in a record book by Carrie McGavick. The cemetery is separated by state, and numbers on the current stone markers correspond to a number in the Carton Cemetery record book. A copy of this book can be viewed by visitors to this day. Carton Plantation would grow to over 1,400 acres and was occupied by the McGavicks until the death of John and Carrie's son, Winder, in 1907. His widow sold the property in 1911. The house passed through the hands of several owners, and then in 1978, it and 10 acres were purchased by the Carton Association and opened to the public as a historic site. With the bloody history and trauma associated with the grounds, it is no wonder that there are numerous spirits said to roam their house and property. The specters are said to be more active at dusk in the fall, especially in October. Carrie McGavick still inhabits her beloved home and has often been seen peering out the window or floating across the back deck. Many witnesses describe seeing her in a white dress and that she looks as solid as a living. She is not the only apparition to be there. Apparitions of children are witnessed throughout the house, and they are believed to be the McGavick children, since only 2 of the 5 survived to adulthood. Ghostly officers have been reported, one pacing the back porch and another riding a horse around the property. Could this be one of the Confederate generals whose bodies were laid out on the porch? Maybe so. In the kitchen, you may come face to face with a disembodied floating head that is said to be that of an enslaved cook going about her daily duties. One of the most intriguing stories is that of a ghost girl who's been seen sweeping the floor in the kitchen. Local lore states that she was murdered in the 1840s by a jealous suitor when she rejected their advances. Details about whether this happened are fuzzy, but the ghost girl is seen nonetheless. Many people tell stories of soldiers in period dress on the grounds, only to find out that there were no reenactors there that day. One such story I've heard many times is of a man with a distant relative who fought and died at the Battle of Franklin. The man decided to take a drive and visit where his ancestor had met his end. He arrived at Carton just after 5 p.m. to tour the mansion, but they were closed. He decided to have a look around the grounds. When he rounded the corner of the house to the smaller front porch, he saw what looked like a soldier getting on a horse. The soldier and horse vanished right in front of his eyes. He noticed another man dressed as a soldier sitting on the porch and asked what he had just seen. The soldier on the porch told him that the horse had been shot out from under him, and the same would happen to him. The man started to look around, trying to understand what he had just witnessed, and when he turned his eyes back to the porch, the soldier had vanished. There are numerous reports of phantom sounds, including voices, drums, footsteps, gunshots, and cannon fire. I have experienced many of these phenomena, including what I believe to be a ghost horse running through me. However, for that story and others, you have to check out the book, Southern Ghost Stories, Franklin, Tennessee, by my good friend Alan Searcy. Unfortunately, Carton Plantation does not allow paranormal investigations at any time. If you ask the tour guides about the hauntings, they have been instructed not to say a word for risk of being fired. Also, do not condone trespassing of any kind, but you can tour the grounds, battlefield, and mansion through one of their daily tours. I recommend checking out this amazing, beautiful historic sites tours, museum, and cemetery. Who knows, maybe you'll have a paranormal encounter of your own. Our next story takes us to Montgomery Bell State Park for the Legend of Werewolf Springs. During the Civil War, railroad tracks were laid in the southern part of what would later become Dixon County. The ground in this area was rich in iron and was home to numerous furnaces that produced hundreds of tons of it every year. The railroad was built to transport iron and other goods. In the years following the Civil War, numerous passenger stations, including Burns Station, began popping up along the route. Our legend begins in the late 1860s with the derailment of a circus train that was en route from Nashville, heading west towards Memphis. An accident caused the locomotive to derail on its approach to Burns Station, and many of the train cars tipped over, allowing some of the circus animals to escape their cages. Most of the animals were rounded up and loaded onto another train, but 2 of the missing creatures were never found. They were known as the Wolfmen of Borneo. A few years after this incident, a farmer and his helper were traveling by horse-drawn wagon through the area on their way to Nashville. They stopped at Hall Springs to get some fresh water and let their horses rest, then returned to the road and proceeded on their journey. Both men began to feel like they were being followed and that something or someone was watching them from the dense forest. They sped up the horses as this thing chased them. The faster they went, the quicker it followed, gaining on them. The men ditched the wagon and made a run for it. The plan was for each to go in a different direction to confuse their hunter. The farmer caught a glimpse of the creature as he hid behind an uprooted tree, and he listened to the horrified screams of the farmhand as this dogman-like creature tore him limb from limb. The farmer hid until morning, when he could escape and make it a few miles to the town of Burns. He ran into town and began to tell the townfolk about this werewolf and what had happened to his traveling companion. News quickly spread in nearby villages, and a posse of men was formed to hunt down the beast to ensure the safety of their families. They devised a plan and headed to Hall Springs, armed with guns, other weapons, and an unlucky goat, which would be used as bait to lure the beast to the spring. It was still daylight when they reached their destination and set up the trap by placing the goat in the clearing near the spring. The men hid behind trees, waiting for nightfall with their weapons locked and loaded. A few hours later, the hunters heard something big and heavy approaching the area in the twilight. They opened fire, and when the smoke cleared, they lit their lanterns and found the goat was missing, along with 2 of their men. No sign of the werewolf, goat, or men were found. The citizens knew they had to devise another plan to kill this beast. They decided to hire the best big game hunter in the area. He agreed to take on the task and was taken to a cabin near the spring. He hunted the werewolf for 2 days and nights with no luck. On the 3rd night, he would get more than he bargained for. The silence of the evening was shattered by loud howls from the trees, and with every howl, the creature got closer. The hunter took aim out of the cabin window and fired upon the beast, but it only provoked the animal. It broke down the cabin door and went after its human prey, making the hunter climb into the rafters to get out of Claw's reach. The man fired everything he had at the creature, but it wasn't fazed. It only became angrier. The sun was starting to rise, and the hunter had just 2 rounds left in his pistol. Thinking this was the end, he resigned himself to save at least 1 round to take his own life. But as the sun began to shine into the cabin, the beast suddenly fled into the forest. The hunter survived, but did not know if he had killed the werewolf or not, and after this ordeal, no one else wanted to look for the beast either. For many years, people claimed to have seen the werewolf, but there are no other confirmed sightings. The area of Hall Springs is now known locally as Werewolf Springs, and is found within the boundaries of Montgomery Bell State Park. It is accessible by taking a 10-mile hike into the depths of the forest. The original cabin is long gone, but has been replaced by a primitive shelter. The spring is still active, and today is surrounded by a submerged stacked stone wall approximately 30 feet across. In recent years, witnesses have claimed that deep in the woods of the park late at night, they have heard the howls of the beast of Werewolf Springs. Some even claim to have seen the creature. Would you be brave enough to spend the night and possibly experience the legend for yourself? Our next story comes from my upcoming book, Small Town Haunts and Legends of Kentucky. This is the Paintsville UFO incident. On January 14th, 2022, a freight train hauling empty coal cars left Russell and was headed towards Shelbyana, Kentucky. At around 2:45 a.m., the train was rounding a curve when it suddenly lost all power. Up ahead, the crew saw lights coming in their direction, but thought it was another train on a parallel set of tracks. As the dark train coasted closer to the object, the crew noticed there were several of the craft, with one in their path hovering about 10 to 12 feet above the tracks. They described the object as 18 to 20 feet long, 10 feet tall, and were lined with rows of colored lights. Without power, the train could not stop, and the flying object collided with the engine, bouncing off and then hitting two of the first coal cars and finally hit the rear locomotive. The impact left massive tears in the steel and demolished the last engine, but the mysterious object did not appear damaged and flew off into the night sky. The impact caused the emergency brake to engage, and the train coasted to a stop about a mile from the scene of the impact. As the locomotive was coming to a full stop, the power was miraculously restored, and the engineer was able to radio for help. The dispatcher instructed the crew to take the damaged train to the old Paintsville train yard. The crew managed to limp the damaged train to the Paintsville yard, arriving around 5:15 a.m. The train yard was weirdly dark, with only vehicle headlights lighting up the end of the tracks. As the crew gathered their belongings and exited the train, an army of individuals in nondescript uniforms took over the scene. A man named Ferguson appeared and told the engineer and crew to follow him to a nearby office. They were subjected to hours of questioning and were forced to have medical tests ran on them. When they were finally allowed to leave the office, they noticed the damaged cars were missing and a huge tent had been erected on the far side of the yard. The crew was escorted off the property and instructed to not discuss the incident because it was a matter of national security. They were all sent to Martin, Kentucky for more questioning and drug testing, but this time by railroad officials. After 8 hours of rest, they were sent on a new train route, and the damaged rail cars were never seen again. The event's been reported by the National UFO Reporting Center, a nonprofit that collects UFO sightings and encounters around the U.S. There's also an account as told by the engineer of the train involved that has been shared around the web and claims to be the official report of the CSX engineer. No hard evidence has been found to support this story, but many believe the incident is one of the many cover-ups of the United States government. All right, everybody, that is all for our special Halloween week episodes. Happy Halloween, everybody. Hope you have good fun trick-or-treating and going out to haunted houses this weekend. I'm going to have some good fun at the night house with the team overnight tonight. But anyway, our new episodes will start November 12th, and those are going to be every other Wednesday instead of every Wednesday like you used to do. But we'll have some new guests, lots of new guests, and we'll bring back some favorites and some friends of mine to come and challenge the show about new projects they have going on. So anyway, tune in November 12th for brand new episodes. Thank you so much for listening. Y'all have a good day. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Unseen Paranormal. Join me next Wednesday with a brand new guest, and please rate, review, share, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now. This helps more people discover the show. You can connect with me over on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or join us in the Unseen Paranormal Lounge group on Facebook. Until next time, remember, some of the scariest things are unseen.
You have come to the end of the line. Whoa. I can feel you as you pass the other side.